In this video, I'm going to show you how we can use SlideGen to set up a report on interim data and replace it with your final data once it's ready. You can download the files I use from the description below this video and follow along, pausing the video when you need to. I'll also touch on a number of the features within SlideGen as we progress through, so this will serve as a good training video for you and your team before you attempt to implement this process on a real project. Before we jump in, I just want to touch on a few of the benefits that come with this process. If you can successfully implement this workflow for just some of your projects, you'll see that it touches on a few important parts of your research delivery process where you might typically find bottlenecks. Number one, gain workload control. Rather than all of your projects coming to a head at the same time, being able to set some of your reports up on interim data allows you to spread the workload and choose when you want to work on a particular report. Number two, test your tab specs. Requesting interim data from your data processing team gives you the added benefit of being able to test your tab spec and reduce the likelihood of last-minute, urgent requests putting strain on your operations department. Number three, efficient quality checking. Because you'll be using our switch data feature, a lot of the quality checking can be done on the interim report, with only spot checks needed on the final report, allowing the QC team to have more control over their time as well. Now, we know this isn't always possible, but there will be many reports where the story in the data starts to reveal itself early. You may even have more time to explore different avenues that you would have traditionally ignored. In this session, we'll cover a few things within SlideGen: uploading your report, uploading your data, and then combining the two by mapping the data to your report. On top of that, we're going to apply some transformations and repeat some slides before finally switching the data. And then if you were doing this on your own project, there are a couple of things to consider before you begin. Number one is, do you need to get the report design signed off by anyone? That could be an internal team, or it could be even your client. If you need to do that, I highly recommend getting it signed off before you even begin in SlideGen. Secondly, do you have all the cross breaks, nets, summary tables, etc. that you need within your data tables? One key thing to bear in mind is that right now SlideGen doesn't allow you to pull data from different tables for one chart. So if you need to be able to pull data that comes from, let's say, a batch of agreement style statements, then you're going to need to request a summary table from your data processing team. We're going to begin by uploading the report and the interim data. So if you open up the zip file that you've just downloaded using the link below this video, that zip file contains your PowerPoint template, your interim data, and your final data. Just to show you the template, I have designed this exactly as I need it and had it signed off internally and by my client before I begin working within SlideGen. So let's start a new project in SlideGen. I'm going to call this one Wild Roots Brand Health Interim Report. And then I'm going to import my slides. And I'm going to import my slides by clicking on the Add Slide button here on the left-hand side. And then I can either drag and drop my file into here, or I can click to open up my Finder, select the template, and hit Upload. For the purposes of this video, we're just going to select all. And then add the slides to the project. Perfect. So we now have all of our slides in here, including the dividers and the initial text slides that we had. Next, I'm going to import the interim data. So there are two ways you can do this. You can actually just navigate to a chart, click on the chart, and then whenever you try and select data, there won't be any, so it'll prompt you to add some. But I'm going to show you on the left-hand side how we can navigate between slides and data sources. If you click on data sources, you can upload your data here. select the parser type quest new, and then again, drag and drop your file into here or click open to find your file. And remember, at this point, we're just using the interim data. So upload your interim data, click upload file, and then your data sheet is going to be sheet 1 update. Now that we've uploaded the PowerPoint and the data to SlideGen, we're in a position to start mapping the data to the report. As you're following along, I highly recommend kind of pausing step by step and trying to keep up with the video. If you've got two screens, having the video on one screen and the SlideGen open on the other screen will be perfect. So first up, we're going to navigate back to slides using this left-hand panel. And then we're going to jump down to what is slide 5, the demographics slide. Here we're going to begin by populating some of the charts. So we'll start with gender. That's this donut chart in the bottom left-hand corner. If you click on the chart, you should find that on the right-hand side, this data selections pane automatically opens. Basically, work our way down the list to choose our data source, which is going to be the only data source that we've implemented. Choose our table, which is going to be gender. So it is s_gender, which of the following best describes you. And then open up this show table view. Best practice, it's always good to filter to only what you need in your row tags. So here I'm going to get rid of frequency row. That's the base row. We don't need that. We just want the percentages. And then it's really good to get used to, rather than just selecting the rows that you need, select the whole column of data that you need. So in this case, I want total. And I want male, female, other. Hit OK, and our donut chart has updated. So moving on to household income, let's click on that, and we're essentially doing the last thing. Now here's a neat little trick. We added this button that's called reload last table. And if you do that, it already pulls in the data source and the most recent table, and you can just drop down to whatever the next table is that you want to use. So in this case, financial category. And again, use the show table view. Get rid of your filter frequency row and select the entire total column. Before we look at the tables here on the right-hand side, we're just going to look at what we call tags. So we have a number of different tags in here, and you can see that those are signaled by these curly brackets, 2 curly brackets opening, 2 curly brackets closing. Now, anywhere that the platform finds those in the report, you can access those and map information to them. So you see here, if I click on this text box, it says XX within these curly brackets. On the right-hand side in the data selections, I have access to that tag XX, and I can start to map stuff to it. So I'm actually going to reload the last table again, and then come down to s_wr_segments, wild root segmentation. And here we're only ever mapping one cell, so I can't actually map a whole column. So we just need to pick the cell that we're interested in. In this case, it's camping enthusiasts, so that's 34%, and we hit OK. And we're going to just repeat that for extreme adventurers and outdoor lifestylers. So click on the tag, reload the last table, open your show table view, pick extreme adventurers, 25%, and the same for outdoor lifestylers. There we go. So these percentages are now mapped to the tags as well. And then we also have more tags in different text boxes above and below. So we have the title with a tag in it, and we also have the base down here, the base note with a tag in it. One thing I should point out to you is that you don't have to pre-prepare your template with these tags. You can actually add them as you're going. So if I click on this top one, Right now you see I only have access to country, but if I wanted to add a new tag, I could say add one like that to the text box. And when I click again, not only do I have access to country, but I also have access to new tag. What you can do with that is you can actually map text to these tags as well. So I'm going to use my table called s_country, and I'm going to open the show table view. And I'm just going to map this information from job title 1 that says UK. I'm going to select the UK and I'm going to hit OK. And that's pulling in that text into this template. So if that text was to change, let's say I switch it out for a German file or a French file, that country information is going to update as well. Equally, I can do that with the base tag down here. This is just my total base, so I'm going to use the total column from the S country table again as well. And I'm just going to map this number 975 to the base down here and hit OK. So that's a short introduction to tags. They're going to become more useful as we go down through the report as well, especially when we want more base information to be visualized. Before we move on though, we do need to look at these tables. Now, there's an important thing to remember about tables in that every table that you add to your PowerPoint, when you map data to it, it's always going to pull in the rows and it's always going to pull in the columns. In this one, my columns, I only need the headers once, but I need data from 2 different tables. So if we jump into the template, I've actually set this up in a way that it does have a row here, but the text is white so that you can't see it. And that means that when it pulls that information through again, when we export it, we're not going to see it. So it will look like it just has this one header. Putting that into practice, if we click on the top table and we want the age question, so s_age, and then we are now going to pick, so remember to remove filter frequency row. We're now going to pick total camping enthusiasts, extreme adventurers, and outdoor lifestylers and hit OK. Then we click on the table below, and this time we want region, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. Filter frequency rows, select total camping enthusiasts and extreme adventurers and outdoor lifestylers. Click OK. So that slide is now ready. Heading down to the brand essentials, we have 2 slides that we want to replicate for unaided awareness, aided awareness, purchase behavior, and consideration. If we start on slide 7, we need to map data to this chart. We need to map the question text, the table name, and the base size. So we'll start on the chart. If you click on the chart again, reload your last table, and then select Q1_A, thinking of brands that offer camping equipment and outdoor clothing, which brands come to mind? This is our unaided awareness question. Open up your table view, filter frequency row, and then just select the entire total column. Hit OK. For the table name tag, just click on the text box, reload the last table, and then select unaided awareness. Hit OK. And then in the footnote at the bottom, click on the text box. In the question tag, we'll just reload the last table, show table view, select the entire question, and then in the drop down where it currently says question, we just want to use that to get to XX, which will be our base size, reload the last table, and then map the total base cell, which is 975. After this, we actually want to start to introduce some transformations to the data here. There's a couple of things that we want to do. Firstly, we want to sort the data from high to low. Then we want to remove the none of these answer option. And then we want to pin Wild Roots, our brand, to the left-hand side of the chart. So rather than doing that in the data in Excel, we can actually go about doing that in the platform really nicely, really easily, using the data transformations functions that you can get to on the right-hand side. You see right now we're in data selections, come down to data transformations, and we'll start to make use of some of these. So first up, let's start by sorting the data. So we'll use the sort by transformation on columns, and we want to sort on the total column, descending. Our chart has now automatically been ordered from high to low, left to right. We did say that we don't want the none of these answer option. You may also want to pin it to the end, but let's just get rid of it for now. I'll show you how we can pin an answer option straight after. So again, clicking on the data transformations, let's filter by text search. And from the rows, so that's our axis, we leave it as is. We want to keep or remove. We're going to remove anything that starts with none. And that's taken on none of these answer option out of the chart. And then we can add a third data transformation. You can keep piling these on. You can use as many data transformations as you want. We're just going to add our third one, which is to anchor labels from the rows at the start of the chart. We want to anchor Wild Roots. Hit OK. So now our chart is sorted from high to low, except for our brand, which is right at the very beginning, Wild Roots, and we have removed none of these. Now, at this point, it's worth noting that when we have the final data, we aren't going to need to repeat any of these actions. When we switch the data, the transformations that we've already applied will be reapplied on the new data. So even if the high to low order changes, you won't need to worry about that. The other good thing is that we can use this neat repeat slide function here across the top banner to repeat this slide layout for other questions in our tables. So if you remember, I said before that we want this section to be based on unaided awareness, aided awareness, consideration, and purchase. Rather than having to add that slide multiple times and do it again and again, we can use this repeat slide functionality to select the tables that we want to repeat this for. And this is why we've mapped the unaided awareness table title, we've mapped the question text and the base size, because when we repeat these things, we won't need to do that again. So let's take Q1, Q2, and Q3 and hit OK. The repeat functions worked, so we just hit next and OK. There we go. And now we have 4 different slides, one for aided awareness, one for purchases, one for consideration. And you see those transformations that we applied earlier on have also been applied to the new data. So the order might not be the same from slide to slide, from table to table, but the platform is reapplying those transformations for us. At this point, you may already feel like you've got a really good understanding of how the data transformations and everything like that work. If this is new to you, if SlideGen is new to you, I recommend watching on and following along because you may uncover some tips that you haven't thought of before. If you feel really comfortable in the platform, I'm going to put timestamps in the description below so that you can jump straight to the switch data part, which is really the bit where we talk about switching the data from interim to final and updating the whole report. For those of you still with us, we're going to work through the rest of these slides and touch on a few of the other transformations, begin to look at SIG testing and those types of things as well. So if we jump down to what is now slide 11, we're going to make the same table selection for the chart, but this time, instead of looking at total, remember to filter frequency row. We're going to pick this segments banner and hit OK. And then we can also map some information to the tags as well. So the same as before, table name is going to be unaided awareness. Down here, my question text is going to be Q1A. And then I have 4 different base tags that I want to populate. So from here, I'm going to pick XX, reload last table, and take my total base size, which is 975. And then using the drop down again, I'm going to use base, reload table, and here I'm going to map camping enthusiast base size, so 376. Base 2 will be extreme adventurers, and base 3 will be outdoor lifestylers. And then we're going to essentially apply the same transformations, but this time, rather than sorting on total, we want to sort on camping enthusiasts, then extreme adventurers, then outdoor lifestylers. Hit OK. We will get rid of the none of these answer option using the filter by text search. So remove none. And then we will pin wild roots to the top using the anchor labels, rows to the start, wild roots. Hit OK. And then let's repeat the slide again. So repeat slides, this time for Q1, Q2, Q3. Hit OK. And all good. We now have unaided awareness by wild roots segments, aided awareness by wild roots, purchases by wild roots, and consideration by wild roots. At this point, you may even want to reorganize your report. So I'll put the 2 unaided slides together. I'll put the 2 aided slides together, the 2 purchase slides together, and the 2 consideration slides together. Now for something a little different, we're going to jump down to slide 16, which is brand metrics. Let's start mapping data. So if we click on the first wild roots chart, reload our last table, and then we're just going to jump down to the table that is called summary table. It's right under the list of tables that are named after each of the brands, and just before the one that's called Wild Roots Makes Clothing that is both practical and fashionable, about halfway down the list. Open up our show table view, and then remembering to get rid of filter frequency row, select the whole Wild Roots column. And we're just going to go through and do exactly the same thing for each brand. They're all in order, so you can just work through them one by one. So the same for Summit. Remembering to get rid of the filter frequency row each time. We don't want our base row to appear in the chart. And we're going to do exactly the same thing on slide 17. And then we just want to map our base sizes at the bottom of each of these slides as well. We're only showing the total base size, so you can just pick the Wild Roots base size, which is 975. Be sure to do it on both slides. And then we want to apply some transformations to this data again. So the transformations that we're going to do here are pretty straightforward. We want to sort the data, pin none of these to the bottom, and then we're going to, for the other charts, sort the data in the same order as Wild Roots. So first up, click on the Wild Roots chart. come over to data transformations and select sort by wild roots. Hit OK. Anchor label none of these to the end. Remember to do it at the end. You might notice that it's already at the end, so you may be wondering, what's the point? Why are we doing that? The point is that if, let's say, none of these all of a sudden has a huge run in your last 1,000 completes or whatever it is that you're collecting, you might find that it bumps up the list. By anchoring it right now, it means when we switch the data, we don't have to go and check that. We know that it's always going to be at the bottom. For the next chart, you could just do the same thing. You could sort the data based on wild roots. That would totally work. I'm going to show you a different transformation though, because it's quite interesting. Here, we can use the transformation called copy order. You'll have to scroll down slightly and then select the shape to copy the order from. Click on the chart for wild roots, and then you can choose to copy the order of the rows or the columns. Let's say rows. And now this chart is in exactly the same order as the wild roots chart. The reason I've done that rather than just sorting on wild roots again is because now that summit chart is linked to the wild roots chart to the point where if I change something like anchoring none of these to the top instead of the bottom, both of my charts are going to update at exactly the same time. I don't then have to go and do the same thing in the summit chart. Obviously, we're not going to do that because it looks silly. Let's just move that back to the end. And then the third little trick that I want to show you on this slide is that now, instead of having to do that again and again, we can just copy the data transformation from this summit chart. So click copy data transformation. Click on Trek and OK. And our transformation is being reapplied to this new chart as well. So now we just need to repeat that on every single chart in slide 16 and 17. Click on Summit, copy data transformation, click on Nomad Country. And this works across slides as well. So I've copied the data transformation from Summit, and I'm going to apply that to wild roots on slide 17. And here we can now copy the data transformation from wild roots rather than jumping back and forth. And then the final thing that we want to do on these two slides is start to introduce some SIG testing rather than the individual charts, is because we want to make a comparison between Summit and wild roots. If we click on the chart for Summit, on the right hand side here, you'll see that we also have a button for visual transformations. And in here, we have SIG testing and percentage indexing. We're going to focus our attention on the SIG testing. So if you click on the drop down, we want to test between columns. The analysis type is going to be a control group, and we're going to set wild roots as the control. And obviously our test group is going to be Summit. I'm happy with the confidence level being set at 95%. And in the visual settings, I want to use the thicker arrows. And I'm happy with the colors. I'm just going to leave the colors as they are. Hit OK and apply. That's now performed a test to show whether there are any significant differences between the response options in wild roots and the response options in Summit. And I'm just going to go through and do exactly the same for Trek, Nomad Country, Edge, and Phoenix. The only thing you need to do is change your test group each time and hit apply. And then you might be surprised to hear that we're going to do exactly the same thing on slide 17. You will need to make these selections again. So select columns, select control group, wild roots as the control. My brand is the test. My visual settings will be the thicker arrows. Hit apply. And then repeat for the other charts. And that's our brand metrics done. Coming into the final section, we're going to make one of these slides for each of the statements that we tested against an agreement style scale. Clicking on the chart, we're going to begin with the statement, Wild Roots makes clothing that is both practical and fashionable. Again, we're going to open up the show table view, and this time we only want the segments column group. From here, before we start mapping the tags, I'm just going to show you how we can use a bunch of different transformations to get this looking exactly right. That will then help with the different tags as well, I think. So let's do that first. Coming back to data transformations, let's first filter out the nets by using the filter by text search to remove anything that starts with net. Then our chart's kind of upside down. We want the strongly agree to strongly disagree to be our legend, and we want our axes, our category axes, to be the different segments. So let's use the switch columns and rows data transformation. Hit OK. Now we have camping enthusiasts, extreme adventurers, outdoor lifestylers across the bottom. And I happen to know that right now the agrees are at the bottom of the chart and my disagrees are at the top. I actually want that to be the other way around. So I want to reverse what are now my columns to set that straight. There we go. So from here, I can begin to map all the different tags that we have in here. So starting at the top, let's start with statement. Load the last table, and the statement you can see is under the tag table title 1. The statement is Wild Roots makes clothing that is both practical and fashionable. Hit OK. And then I've got these top 2 boxes in here as well. So let's start on the left hand side. We want the top 2 box for camping enthusiasts. So open up the show table view and select net agree from camping enthusiasts, 74%. The same for extreme adventurers, 84%. And the same for outdoor lifestylers, 79%. And then we have the individual base sizes that are mapped below the chart as well. So here we have n equals seg1. Click on that. That is going to be the base size for camping enthusiasts, 376. Seg2, 252 for extreme adventurers. Outdoor lifestylers, 347. And then we want the question text and the statement at the bottom. So question text will be, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The statement will be, Wild Roots makes clothing that is both practical and fashionable. And then the XX here will be the total sample size, which is 975. Now, again, just to reiterate, obviously you know this by now, but all of these things that we map are going to update when we switch the data, including the individual base sizes that we've mapped for the individual segments and the top 2 boxes, and of course the chart. I mentioned that we wanted to repeat this for the different statements. You can imagine, even if doing this in the app 8, 9, 10 different times, is going to be a bit time consuming, a bit annoying. So rather than having to do that, we can just repeat the slide, select the different statements, all the way down to wild roots, reclaim, reuse, and recycle as much as possible. Hit OK. And there we go. So now we have one of these for each of the different statements. The top two boxes have been updated, the sample sizes, the actual statement at the top, all updated. And finally, we have this environmentally friendly statement for each of the brands. So again, we're just going to map some data and perform some slightly different transformations this time. So on the chart in the top left-hand corner, we have another summary table. This time you're scrolling all the way down to the bottom to the table that's just called summary. Open up your show table view and filter out your frequency row, select wild roots. So the question here is, to what extent do you agree or disagree that each of the following brands are environmentally friendly? This summary table, it was asked for each of the brands. This summary table just brings all of the brands into one table again. And I'm just going to repeat that for all of the different brands. There we go. Once you've got your data mapped to the charts are actually looking a little bit ugly right now. It doesn't show the data that we're actually interested in. I noticed that I've accidentally pulled in base text there as well, so let me just update that. Forgot to filter my frequency row out. There we go, that's better. So yeah, it's looking a little bit ugly. This isn't actually how we were planning to visualize the data. What I was hoping for is top two, neither, and bottom two for each brand. So what we need to do here, if we go back into the transformations, is reorder the data. So I'm going to reorder the data by bringing my net to the very top, my neither agree nor disagree to the second position, so just below net, and then net disagree below that. There we go. So now my order is slightly different. And what I want to do from there is actually trim the data to just keep the first three rows. So select rows first and then type in the number 3. And we're just keeping those first 3 rows. So I've managed to get it down to just net agree, neither agree nor disagree, and then net disagree. I can then switch the rows and columns around. And again, I know that the data is upside down, so I just need to reverse my columns. This is Wild Roots now. You can see the brand name, Wild Roots, and it's now showing me my top 2 box, my neither agree nor disagree, and my bottom 2 box. Again, this is where this copy data transformation button comes in really handy. You can imagine that going through and having to do those transformations 9 more times might be a bit frustrating. So I can just copy the data transformations and select my target shape, hit apply, done. And just repeat that process. And finally, before we get on to switching this out for the final data, we can just map the question text and map the base size. So from here, we now have an entire report set up on Interim data. And in fact, you can download that entire report. You have no limit to the number of downloads that you can do. So download all your slides. And at this point, as I said in the introduction, you can send this off to your QC team and ask them to check everything based on the interim data. Because you know that when you swap the data out for the final data, all of these transformations and everything like that are going to be repeated and updated with the new data. So at that point, you can really get away with just doing spot checks. Welcome back to those of you who may have skipped ahead to this section while we've just been completing the final few slides. This is really the important part. This is what you're watching this video for. We now have our final data. We've made a few tweaks to our tab spec. We've requested final data from our data processing team. We have the final completes. The report's all been quality checked. Our team are happy with it. We're now ready to update this with the final data. At this point, I highly recommend duplicating the entire report. This is obviously our interim report. We want to keep that so that we have it to fall back on. So I'm going to duplicate this report, hit OK. And now we have a new version of that report as well. And I'm going to just rename that. I'm going to open it and call it final. We need to now go back to data sources and simply repeat that process of uploading data, but this time, instead of the interim data, we are going to use the final data set. And upload that file. I just want to draw your attention to a few things. So specifically the base sizes, I think that's where it's going to be easiest to see the differences. Obviously, the total base size right now is 975. Maybe keep an eye on some of these percentages as well. Obviously, you're not going to remember what they all were, but let's say camping enthusiasts with 34%, extreme adventurers 25, outdoor lifestylers 41. So going back into the data sources, I am going to click on this button below data source 1 next to the remove data source. We have this other button, which is called switch data. And I'm going to hit I understand and want to proceed, and I'm going to select my file for data switch. We only have one other file right now, which is our final data. And from here, we're just going to check compatibility. There are no issues. And now we can see that I did see that some of the data shifted on this one, but let's go back to the first slide. Here we now have 2,334 respondents. This is now 38%, 27, 35. A lot of the other data will have updated as well. If the order's changed, it will have updated here. Same here. All of our slides are updated essentially. SIG testing has been reapplied, and so on. So now we have a final report that we can download. And that's it. This is our final report. So you can kind of see that actually you need to put a little bit of work in to map the data during the interim stage and test everything. But you can do that whenever you want during the period of field work. You don't have to have that come right at the end of the process. You can get everything set up, you can get it all tested, you can test your tab spec. Then when it comes to receiving the final data, it is literally a 2-minute job of maybe even less than that, switching the data, downloading the report, and then obviously you'll probably want to do some spot checks, but everything will have updated. So all of your data will now be correct and updated. Your SIG testing's reapplied. And this is your final report that essentially can be sent over to your customer with the added benefit of them not having to wait around for you to actually compile this report once the fieldwork has completed. So that's it. You've now worked through a complete project from interim to final data. If you want to start trying to test this out on some of your own projects, feel free to go ahead. Also, if you run into any issues, there's a little chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of the app, or you can email the team.